There's only one thing that I was disappointed by.
Were there any Easter eggs that you guys noticed in it at all that you sort of would mention now?
Yeah, absolutely. There was the DVD that Joel and Sarah watched at the very beginning. That was something that was in the game at a later period, and they couldn't get that in, obviously, with the game because it was later on in the game. But they thought it was important to get that particular film in the series. So that was really cool. And then Matt also we published on TikTok.
Yeah, I don't know if it was I don't know if it's an Easter egg because it's probably going to play an integral part of the series. But right at the end, right up on the top building, I spotted a clicker. And it was just stood up there, real small. Wasn't supposed to be immediately spotted, but there's one up there, and as they're heading out into that sort of wilderness, which is exciting.
If for people who haven't played the game, it's gonna get a bit darker. So yeah, just stick with it. I'm not gonna spoil it, obviously, but it's gonna get even darker. Overall, though, I mean, all the way as someone who's played the game and watched people play it through a number of times, I just thought that the whole thing was just there was so much pressure on it, and I thought they just delivered in every aspect. And I think it just showed to me, it proved how strong the source material was, how strong the game story was itself, and the narrative in the game. They didn't have to take any crazy creative decisions. And they took real attention to detail in terms of matching things to the game. But I think that was important, not because to satisfy people who played the game, but because the game narrative and story is so good, they didn't need to divert from that at all. And I think that's where it really shines through, that source material. And especially, I think, again, spoiler alert. So if you still haven't turned off, if you still haven't watched episode 1, you can go now. But how they sucked you in with Nico Parker as Sarah was incredible in their first episode. How they kind of sucked you in with Sarah, and they got you, just like the game, they get you attached to Sarah, and they get you to almost love her as a character and know how kind she is and her character, and you get the audience to like her. And then the death scene, when Joel is holding Sarah, it's just like the game, just how it happens in the game. I mean, I was like, when that happened in the game, I was like, what? I could not believe that that's how they started the game, because I just assumed that he was going to be with that little girl the whole way through. It hadn't occurred to me that there was a different character. So to see that on a TV screen, and to see acted in such a way, in almost mirroring and to me, it had a more profound effect watching it again on the big screen, and in the way they did it. And they didn't change anything really about that scene from the video game, but the way they delivered it, it just showed, if you get the casting right, and you make sure that you've got the right cast to deliver the characters that you want, you don't need to mess with the original source material. Tom said, I was in tears. Yeah, I can put my hand up. I was crying my eyes out at that scene, because it just hits you so hard. And it was perfection for me, that scene. I don't know what you thought.
The way Pedro Pascal acted that scene was just because I haven't played the game, but I know that part of the story. I've seen the opening kind of cutscenes and things of the game, and I've had friends that have played it and stuff. And so I knew that was coming. But the thing, like you say, the way that they managed to attach the audience to Sarah by focusing on her so heavily in the beginning, and kind of how she was, she would go and visit her neighbour, and she would go and do all of this, just generally kind things, and she was just a really nice, well-rounded person. What was the hardest hitting for me wasn't when he's knelt down and he's cuddling her and he's crying and all sorts that you'd expect, although fantastically acted. What was the best part for me, whether you call it the best, but the best part for me was the moment he realised something had happened, and like, because he was just like, you know, they got in that whole thing, fall down the hill and whatnot, and then he's sort of just assuming in his head that she's still fine, and then the moment he realizes is just that it was a split second switch. You could see it's just so fantastically acted, because you really felt that switch from we got to get out of here to what oh my god, like everything, my whole world is falling apart now. And even though the world is literally falling apart, and it's not until that moment that you see his world fall apart, and that was, and even then he's going, you're fine, it's okay, like, you know, trying to sort of be the strong one. And those moments, it was the subtleties that I knew he was going to get right in the acting when he was cast. That's why I always thought that he was the perfect person to cast for this role, because you've seen it in like The Mandalorian and whatnot, and just throughout his career, that he's really good at subtle moments and subtle changes. I mean, being in The Mandalorian and acting with a mask on for most of it, and it was still amazing. Like, you know, that to me just speaks volumes to him as an actor. But the cast as a whole was just so believable, believable.
Even the crawl, that kind of desperate crawl to Ellie. Sorry, to Sarah.
To Sarah,
yeah. Okay. That desperate crawl to Sarah when he, obviously because he's been shot, and then he realizes that Sarah's been shot, and that desperate crawl that matches the video game, you know, to a T. If you see it side by side, it's exactly the same. And what really hits you as well, I think, is that you don't get that long to process that moment. A lot of the times with TV and film, it's a very long, drawn out scene when something like that happens. But the way it just cuts off and then goes to, you know, such a long period later on the line, you're like, what we've gone from, like, it's such a shock to see that moment, and then you go so far into the future. Again, just like the game, I think it had exactly the same impact on me that the game did. So yeah, it was just incredible. The show overall, again, attention to detail, like some of the cut scenes when they're in Joel's apartment and he's on the settee and she's like, well, what am I gonna do? And, you know, I'm sure you'll figure something out. And, you know, when he pushes her in the room and she's like, you know, screaming, like exactly how Ellie did in the game. And then just talking through, just generally, you know, moments where you just go, I've been there before. Like, you know, it's weird when you play the game, you just feel like you're engrossed in it. And
there were so many moments that when I didn't know they were cutscenes, but I knew they were cutscenes. That's what I thought they did well. Like, I know it's a game, and a lot of people will watch it and know it's a game, but there were so many cutscenes that I didn't recognize, but you just know they're cutscenes because of the way they filmed them. It's like there's like this slight change in how it's presented and how it's filmed, and the cinematography and stuff to sort of match the game without copying it. That, I think that's what is most impressive. It matched the games, and since the first episode I've seen some of the cutscenes where people have been comparing them side by side, and the way it matches those scenes but without copying is so impressive, because they've taken the script and they've taken the source material and they've taken the shots and they've recreated them, but they haven't looked to try to make sure that they're, like, you know, it's the exact same angle of the game, but the feel is all the same, everything's the same. Like the angle, the shots, for example, with Ellie and Joel while he's laying on the sofa, that was quite impressive because it's not exactly the same, but you still, the feel, it feels exactly the same, but when you watch it objectively, it's not exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I think they did that really well with all the cutscenes, really.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just
I've
being
seen
able to.
so many side by sides on Twitter and stuff. People have uploaded afterwards comparing the cutscenes to the real thing, and I think it just, like you mentioned earlier, Nathan, it just shows you how good the game is itself, and the dialogue and the cutscenes, that a big company like HBO can make this show and then keep so much of the original structure.
I can't think of a time where I've watched the opening episode of something and I've just genuinely just been all in for the whole thing. There's only one thing that I was disappointed by, but I think that's more of it's a personal thing to me than it is to do with the actual writing or the acting or whatever. And that's the opening scene. And again, if anybody is watching and they haven't seen it and they're going to watch it, there's going to be spoilers. So the opening scene where they're on a talk show and the scientists are talking about how if fungi can if that can learn how to survive in warmer temperatures, then there's going to be this massive outbreak, and everything in that was brilliant. Like the script was good. I thought the description was really good. It was really realistic. It was really like, oh, this could happen, which made it very scary. However, I felt like I was completely taken out of the show before it even really started because of who they cast as the host of that chat show, who I know him as Big Head from Silicon Valley. And if you haven't watched Silicon Valley, it is a comedy, and the guy that plays Big Head is primarily a comedy actor. So I had to sort of wait until that had finished, and then I could go, right, okay, now I'll get into it.
Did you manage to rewatch that first scene?
Yeah, I went back and rewatched it. There's nothing wrong with the writing. It's purely me.
I can imagine people were sitting at home watching that scene and they were having like their significant other be like, is that true? Is that
it
true?
Felt so real
because it was
like,
it was really thought-provoking, the way that you're explaining it in such detail, and the host, maybe why they cast a comedy actor in that role. The way the host was trying to bat off his concerns, and he just kept going and kept going, and he didn't dismiss the host at all. He just very calmly, it was the calm way he said it, very calmly explained how humanity could be decimated by this thing in a very calm way. And I think that's the delivery of that was incredible. But,
and how he didn't think it was that far off, and all of that stuff. Yeah, like you're absolutely right. It was a well-needed scene. And do you know what? Like watching it back, the other thing that I realised about it, which I think is great that they did it, like that they opened with that scene, it immediately squashes all of the fears that you have about spores not being in it.
I do have to just point out something that I was really disappointed about, because I didn't feel like it was exactly the same as the game that I played, because in my game, my character wandered around for about half an hour not knowing where to go, and also threw an accidental grenade at the wall. And that wasn't in the game, so that wasn't in the TV show. So I'm really disappointed with that.
Imagine they remade the series just from your gameplay, just from your exactly scene for scene. He's accidentally thrown a grenade over there.
Yeah, just spinning around on the spot, trying to figure out the controls and how he moves, and accidentally throwing grenades and dropping weapons everywhere.
Which buttons jump?
Yeah, exactly. Jumping on the spot and stuff. Yeah. So that wasn't in the game, but no, obviously joking. But I was just as soon as it finished, I was like, oh, when is episode 2? Like, I wish I could binge it all.
It feels too long.